A 10-minute call.
Mr. Speaker, I think that the Minister has outlined the facts as we know them in a clear way. I will not attempt to replicate his explanation of the facts, but I think we can already draw some conclusions about matters which are actually crystal clear and matters where we have to accept events are unfolding. All the information is not in front of us, and people should just be a little hesitant about reaching hard and fast conclusions at this stage in the process. When I think about what I might put under the heading of certain facts are already crystal clear, let me start with the issue of concern for the victim. This is of central importance to all members of this House. We all understand that. This is of central importance to this side of the House, to this government, and to the Minister's consideration of the most appropriate steps to be followed. The allegations lie at near the absolute height of gravity of offences that can be levied against anyone in our country. We take this enormously seriously, and we are deeply concerned, as we would be in any situation where similar allegations were made, not only about the situation of the victim, but the very real and understandable desire for justice, which lies at the heart of a number of issues of great importance to our society over literally 100 or more years. So the idea propagated by one member that somehow this shows indifference is bordering on the insulting, Mr. Speaker, bordering on the insulting. We take this concern for the victim the utmost seriousness, and we will do whatever we can to ensure, through proper procedures, that the victim gets justice in this case. The second reality is already people are firing bullets far, far too early at the New Zealand police. As a citizen of our country, I've developed enormous respect for our police over many years, the incredibly difficult pressures they are put under, the conflicting demands made on them. I think I, along with, I'm sure, a vast majority of New Zealanders, hold our police in very, very high regard. And the central facts are that this matter was investigated by our police officers. I don't know the details around it, understandably, but this was investigated immediately. I'm informed that support services were put around this young victim immediately when the police became aware of it. Charges were laid. The idea that the New Zealand police has somehow fallen off the pace, I think, is completely wrong. People should sometimes just keep their mouth shut before the facts are known to them, before putting out absurd allegations against honourable members of the New Zealand Police Force, which in this case have followed exactly, as far as I can tell so far, the procedures that any of us would want if it were a member of our own family involved in this. The third reality is a complex one, and it revolves around the entire practice of diplomatic immunity, and of course there's a whole series of conventions that flow from that, including declaring people persona non grata, reaching agreement for ambassadors, and it all plays into a very complicated part of international relations. Then this goes back from bitter experience, literally, Mr. Speaker, over centuries, about the need for countries which may be even literally at war to have procedures in place that protect envoys from the interference of the political process through a quasi-judicial process. And while this gives rise to grave difficulties of interpretation, as in this case, the underlying practice which all countries have accepted is that this is a very special place where you want to keep politics and the judicial process quite separate. The idea that the minister should somehow become some operating police officer in his, or had it been somebody else, her right, is completely ignorant of the underlying need to follow very strict procedures which have developed literally over centuries of bitter experience. Now, different countries have different interpretations in terms of their interests and how they apply these cases. I know that in the case of the United States, so grave is the concern over decades, well, I think 100 years of US State Department policy, over the danger of judicial processes being manipulated, that in cases where even the most flagrant abuse by their own diplomats have been at least alleged, they will always invoke diplomatic immunity. They will never, ever grant a waiver. It is a matter of the State Department policy, and as far as I know, it's been a permanent policy position for at least as long as I can recall. With New Zealand, we take a slightly more nuanced position in terms of our own diplomats serving overseas. Not only do we expect them to obey the laws of the country, but my understanding is, I don't have the details on this, but I believe there have been cases where we have waived diplomatic immunity and allowed the prosecution of certain people to take place. I think they've been very rare, and I stand to be corrected, but that is my understanding. Most certainly on very minor matters involving, for example, traffic infringements, minor speeding events, it is standard operating procedure, I can assure the House, having worked for the diplomatic service over decades, that you are expected to pay the fines as if you were an ordinary citizen of the country to which you are accredited. So there are different interpretations of this, but ultimately we have to respect the choice of the government concerned in how to interpret these conventions that do lie at the absolute heart of international relations and the role of envoys to prosecute matters, literally, I say, even when there is war going on between states. We need to maintain avenues, and countries have learned the importance of ensuring that their envoys do have diplomatic immunity for precisely those reasons. This, of course, understandably gives rise to outrage in a case like this where there is no question of the national interest of Malaysia being involved. But this has meant that very clear procedures are laid out designed to protect the process from political interference. And the Minister has done absolutely the right thing by letting the process work. Now, it seems that bits of that process have not worked correctly. That is why my understanding is that the Secretary of Foreign Affairs has apologised to Mr. McCulley, and review of the procedures being followed are underway. But the idea that this means that the Minister should have been personally executing this procedure himself is quite the wrong conclusion to be drawn from this situation. The third reality relates to our relationship with Malaysia. The proposition that I've heard through the airwaves and in some of the media today that this has, quote, damaged our relations with Malaysia are unfounded, Mr. Speaker. We have an incredibly close and productive relationship with Malaysia. We will continue to have a close and productive relationship with Indonesia. The very fact that the Minister of Foreign Affairs was on the phone to his Malaysian counterpart indicates that relationship is very strongly in place. This is a highly respectable country. I am not going to, like the previous member, start to lecture the Malaysian High Commissioner on what she should or should not do. I believe that the Malaysian system is a robust system. We will watch now with great interest to see what unfolds. But in the light of the very clear statement of the Malaysian Minister of Foreign Affairs that this serious, very serious offence calls into question the integrity of the Malaysian diplomatic service, albeit the military arm of the diplomatic service, is something that members should take note of. We will watch and see how the procedure unfolds in terms of what we assume it will be a court-martial. And while I'm not familiar with the penalty regimes of the Malaysian court-martial system, the thought just occurs to me on a personal level that should the allegations be proven, it may well be that the person who allegedly perpetrated this may even regret the decision not to be tried in New Zealand. We will wait and see. So events are unfolding. All the facts are not before us at this stage. We know that it is the responsibility of the Secretary of Foreign Affairs through his officers to keep the Minister informed. Clearly, the Minister considers that that obligation has not been fully lived up to in the circumstances. So we will watch this, and the key point I wish to finish on, Mr. Speaker, is the very clear, and I'd have to say encouraging statements from the Malaysian Minister of Foreign Affairs that further legal procedures, including extradition, are not ruled out.
Just before I call the honourable member, just to advise that it's a 5-minute call. I call the Honourable Marianne Street.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.